You know the good. You maybe see. I'm gonna say a couple things before I get into what I got for today. Singing that song, "Blessed Assurance," it's always been one of my favorites, and I was sitting there thinking about it. That it says, "This is my story. This is my song." Well, the good thing about being alive in our walk with God and in our our stories is it's not a short story. It's not a kid's book where you got four words on each page and then 10 pages later you close the book and you're done and you're good to go. Instead, it's a story that has chapters. Whereas my story used to be one of hurt, of pain, of suffering, of longing for things. Well, then we close that chapter. We go on to a chapter of love and of mercy and of grace and of God. And then I go on to continue on to the next chapter where it goes on, where I share that with others. There's a continuance of it. It's not a short story. We are living a story that God had written for us. It's like Jesus. He's narrating our lives. And so it's important that we don't close the chapter before God's ready to close the chapter. But it's important that we realize that in the Bible it doesn't refer to it as chapters, but it's a season. For everything there's a season. There's a purpose. So yes, there's a lot of us in this room that have dealt with some of these things that I just listed: the hurt, the pain, the long suffering, these things that we have went through in our lives, childhood, adulthood. We've all, it's not limited to just me. But it's important that we know that it's gonna pass. This too shall pass, is what the Bible tells us. And so it might be a rough patch today, but that doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have a rough patch tomorrow. Because if we remember in them other chapters where it tells us that there is peace and there is comfort in the arms of the Lord, then we don't have to deal with that no more. We could go on and move on and live with God. But that's the point that I want to make is when we live for God and we have God living in us and we allow Him to live through us and we continue to live the way He intended for us to live, then it's all good. It may seem bad, but it ain't bad. I know I've heard it said, and I know I've said it. Better is my worst day living for God was better than my best day living for the devil. Because the devil didn't do nothing good for me, and Jesus did it all for me. So that has nothing to do with what I have for this morning, but I just wanted to say that this morning. Just remember, it's not a short story. It's a chapter book. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and go into my scripture text for this morning. I'm going to have two different sections. The first one is going to be 2 Corinthians chapter 6. We're going to begin in verse 14. And we're going to read 14 through verse 17. And it starts and it just says, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? And what concord hath Jesus hath Christ with Belial? Or what path hath he that believeth with an infidel? And what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God. As God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing." And I want to focus the part of that. I know there's a lot there. We'll go through some more of it, but the be ye separate. That. And we're going to go over the next part. I'm not going to do it just yet. We're going to pray, and then I'll go into this here in a few minutes. But the next part we're going to go into is 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 19 through 21. But like I said, that's going to be later on. It's not, or here in a few minutes. It won't be just right away. But Lord, I ask that you would have your way in the service. Give me the words that you would have me to say. Lord, hide me behind your cross for your name's sake, Jesus. Amen. You may be seated. This morning, I want to talk about the title of this is Saying Goodbye Isn't Hard When It's for the Lord. Uh, as fleshly beings, the flesh doesn't want us to change things or to cut people out of our lives or to leave our families or to go do other things. We want to be here. We want to be around each other. You know, we have 5 out of the 7 siblings that live within 30 minutes of each other now. And 4 of us live within 5 minutes of each other, I think, at the most. That's just because you got some stop times in between. But you know, we love that. You know, we have, Alan texted me Friday. Can I come kidnap my boy? Come on. Right before that, Tammy had already asked, can Joe spend the night? Or Anna Lynn and Joe, yeah. They had asked the kids if they want to spend the night. Caleb said no. Joe said yes. So it's really nice to have that, and it's like, it's for the kid. I'll enjoy getting to see my kids play with their cousins and be around their aunts and their uncles, because I know for me growing up, being around my cousins and my aunts and my uncles meant a lot to me. We had a good time when we were there. You know, we had fellowship and we had fun and we played games, and there was a lot of good and great memories. But going home, we'd have to go back to Indiahoma or Vernon or wherever we happened to be living, or if they were off, Fort Worth or Cleveland or somewhere around that area, we'd have to come back to Electra or Vernon, and so we had to leave. And as a kid, you don't want to leave because you know what it's like at home. It's not the same as when you're at Aunt Leila's and you're playing with Billy and Terry and Alicia, doing things, running around. You get your chores done and then you just go outside or one of my favorite places to visit when I was little was my Aunt Velma's house out in East Texas. I loved going out there because as my grandparents that I had, my mom's side had passed away when I was younger, so I didn't really have a relationship with them. But her aunt, which was my great aunt, was like that grandmother for me. And I spent a summer out there, and I've spent some time out there off and on throughout some years where I spent a month here or a couple of weeks. And I always loved it. I didn't care that, whenever we were little, driving from Indiahoma out there, that was a long drive. You had to go through all them little towns, and I mean, we ran out of games to play. I remember multiple times Alan and I sitting in the back seat counting telephone poles. And there's a lot of telephone poles on the side of the highway. And so we would get bored, but I always loved it because I knew that I was going to Aunt Velma's house. We were going to have fun. There was nothing to do out there but play outside, and you did. That's what you did. Is you played outside. But we also ate good. I mean, I loved it. We ate good and just avoid the snakes and the wasps. That was the only rule. And so but whenever we had to come home, it upset me. I didn't want to come home. We get home, I was upset because I didn't want to be at home. I wanted to stay there. So it was hard for me to say goodbye in those situations. Whenever siblings have moved out of the house or they have moved elsewhere around the country, even as adults, it is hard to say goodbye when they go back home. When my sister Bobby came to visit for those few days, and Bobby went home, it was, I didn't want her to leave. I love, having her around. When we left Candy's last November, I didn't want to leave because I wanted, it's especially when you don't see them very often. We still talk. I talk to Candy every day. I talk to Bobby several times a week, but it's not the same as being there physically. I make the joke of when you talk to Brother Scott on the phone, I try to beat him to goodbye because Brother Scott, when he's done talking, he'll say bye, hangs you up on you. So there's been a couple times I might have, as a joke, I probably hung up on Scott a couple of times just because I was like, all right, bye, and I'd hang up, just try to beat him to it as a joke, and those are just pleasantries because I see Scott several times a week. And here lately we've spoken several times a week, but I've made jokes about it and I've talked about it, but Rhonda's phrase is she likes her people to be. She wants all her people to be. Okay? Now, this is where I want to change it, and I'm going to go against all of what I just said. Okay? If God has called one of us to go somewhere else, You've got to cut them loose. It is the hardest thing to do. Because I think that's one of the hardest things for us to do as Christians, to answer a call, is because we don't want to leave where we're at. It's a comfortable thing, but it's also because we don't like to say goodbye. I don't want y'all to think that this is my going away message. That's not what this is. Okay? Because what I want to say is, if I'm called to go somewhere else to preach, or if I'm called to go somewhere else that I feel that I could help out in another area and I need to leave, one of the hardest things that's going to be for me is to tell my sister bye. Even if I'm going to Owl Park, 10 minutes is what it takes to get here to Owl Park. At 77 miles an hour, it's 10 minutes. I've timed it daily. That's still 10 minutes away. Instead of, hey, I'll be over there in just a few seconds. My sister Rhonda's always been the one that's been there for me. You know, my Aunt Leila's been there for me too. But, you know, I was always closer to Rhonda in the aspect of a second mother, a maternal thing for me. So for me to say, and you know, even Tammy, Tammy lives 1 block from me now, and we talk on the phone almost daily, and me and Tammy text all the time, and I go by there, and you know, it's like she could leave my house, and then I go to her house 5 minutes later, and it's like we hadn't seen each other all day. And so we get all these, and our mom moved back to town. We get all these people here, and it would be so hard for me to say, hey, look, I feel that I'm needed elsewhere. The Lord's been dealing with me. I got to go to Owl Park. I got to go to Harold. Even closer. But I got to go. So I'm not going to be here every day to see you. I'm not going to be at every church service to see you. But just know that I'm going with God. And so we have to say goodbye in that situation because of that. But the other part of it is this. If there is a friend or even a family member that is not living for God, and you know that when you go around that person, that it brings out the worst in you, and that you can't be around them for a long period of time because you're going to start acting like you used to, it's time to say goodbye. I'm not saying cut them out of your lives completely, but what I'm saying is this. Maybe you don't go over to that person's house every day, or you don't text them every day, or you don't call them every day, because you know that what you're going to say to them or what they're going to say to you is not going to be a godly scenario, and it is not going to be a godly conversation. So therefore, you have got to back off. And you have got to say, no, because this is not for my walk with God. The benefit for me to walk with God and be as close to God as I can possibly be means I need to limit my interactions with you. And that is the hardest thing to do, because I know that there are times that we are very close to family members, that they are very close to our cousins or somebody along that line of we got to be an example and say, look, if it's not what's going to lead me to heaven, then I can't be a part of this no more. If that means I got to say my house is a sober area, I don't want any alcohol in my home, then that's what we're going to have at my home is no alcohol. You ain't going to do none of that stuff at my house. You're not going to find it at my house. You don't even to cook with. It ain't at my house. Because I don't want it to be at my house, because I want that to be an area, to be a safe zone. People that don't like to be around it don't have to be around it. And it has caused an issue in the past where they've asked, what about this? And I said, no. But I'm going to stand firmly in that belief because I know the way it makes people act. And I know how it upsets me when people start acting a certain way. And it's not good for me to be around it. So I'm not going to be around it. So that way also, that's why I like to take my own vehicle to places we go to. Because whenever somebody starts acting a fool, I can say, I'm out the door. And I'm going to drive in my vehicle, and I'm going to round up my family, and I'm going to say, hey, we're out of here. I don't want to be here for this. I'm not going to do this. Because I can't be a witness to others if I'm upset. If I'm acting a fool, I can't be a witness. I can't be an example. I can't be a leader or nothing if I'm acting a fool. We put in so much effort to look good in the eyes of others, but we don't put hardly any effort into looking good for God. That's the saddest thing I ever seen in my life. We keep our hair, the men, we keep our hair cut. As a young man, I kept my hair done a certain way because I thought maybe the ladies would like it. and also I didn't want to comb it. I kept my hair high and tight until it went away. And now I keep it really tight. But I've seen the we do things to impress people. You know, it's a I've heard people talk. I work with a man that he spent the better part of his early lives as an alcoholic. For the last 20 some, about I think 20 or 21 years, he's been sober. And he didn't do it for anybody but himself. And he said that he's had family members that called him and said, "Hey, can you talk to this cousin or this, somebody that they're having the same problem you did, but can you tell them what you did to do it?" He said, "I can't tell them nothing because if they don't want to do it for them, they can't do it." He said, "Because I didn't do it for my mama, I didn't do it for my kids." He said, "I did it for me." And he said, that's whenever my life changed and I became, I have one child that saw me that way and I have one that never has seen me touch it. He said, so there's two different styles. And so that's how I have made changes, and I have I haven't cut people out of my lives, but I have stopped fellowshipping as much with certain people because I did it for me and my walk with God. So I had to move on past that. And so I my mind went blank on what I had to say. I'm not going back. Okay? I know where I was. Like I said a while ago about the chapter book. That chapter closed. I am not going to reread that chapter. I'm going to move on because I'm excited to see what's happening in the next chapter. Because part of my chapter is these two youngsters that are on the back row, next to back row and in the back row. That's going to be a chapter in my book. I'm a chapter in Aunt Leela's book. I'm a chapter in Rhonda's book and Brother Scott's book, Brother Wall's book, Danita's book. We were in youth group together. It was a short chapter, but Sister Wall is a chapter in my book. I was a chapter in her book. You don't understand how many people these books are long. Sister Linda's got a book. But she's also in a book. But the ultimate goal is to make the Lamb's book of life, right? And so I got to say goodbye and go on. And so, it says don't be, in this chapter in this Corinthians. It says, "Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness?" It's opposite. Light and dark. It's opposites. They say opposites attract, right? My wife is a calm, collected person. She's non-confrontational. She doesn't like confrontation. She doesn't like that kind of situation. I, on the other hand, to quote Mark Lowry, I sometimes can't spell calm, cool, and collected. I am a little bit more. I would say I got enough backbone for me and her both. So we're the opposite when it comes to that. I will stand up for things. I will be assertive when I need to be assertive. But I'm not talking about the marriage part of this. I'm talking about if I believe 100% that I need to live a godly life, then I got to move on from some of these friends and former friends. I can tell them about Jesus, but I can't stay hitched to them because it's going to wear you down. I know Brother Fillmore was in the military, and I've seen the videos, and I've had to help carry things with people that were not quite as strong as me. And so when you're holding a piece of pipe on your shoulder, or you're trying to do something, and you got somebody in front of you that might be, two or three people are on this piece of pipe, and you got one of them that's shorter than the rest of them. He's not holding his weight. He might be tired because his arms are fully extended, but he's putting pressure on. He's doing what he can do, but the other two are going to get a little more tired. It's going to wear you out when you're having to pull weight for somebody else. So if you're trying to shackle yourself as a yoke, that goes across your shoulder. So if I'm standing there with somebody that doesn't believe the way I believe, and I'm trying to convert them, and I have tied myself to this person, Eventually, I'm going to work myself in a circuit. I'm going to get tired. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to try pulling. But they're going to be pulling too. And if I tire myself out before them and we're not working equally, then that's going to pull me aside. So we shackle ourselves with our brothers and sisters that believe, or we yoke ourselves. I don't know why I keep putting shackle. We yoke ourselves with brothers and sisters that believe the same way we do, so that we work equally. We pull the cart equally. Now, we stop and we help others, but we make sure we don't tie on to them. We we have God dwelling in us, so we have to be separate from the world. If they look at you and they can't spot a difference, something went wrong. It's time to get right. Right? So, it's hard to do, to say goodbye. But when it's for the Lord, it shouldn't be that way. You know, what he told them in that New Testament, whenever he called those guys to walk with him, he said, take up your cross and come with me. And they said, well, let me go do this. And he says, well, let them do this on their own. You just come with me. Right? So I want to go to 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 19 through 21. And this is a very familiar portion of scripture of Elijah and Elisha. And it says, so he departed thence and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and went and he with the 12. And Elijah passed by him and cast his mantle upon him. And he left the oxen, ran after Elijah, and said, let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and mother, and then I will go with thee. And he said unto him, go back again, for what have I done to thee? And he returned back to his home, took a yoke of oxen, and slew them, and boiled their flesh with the instruments of the oxen, and gave unto the people, and they did eat. Then he arose and went with Elijah and ministered unto him. He went and had a feast that he was called to go with the man of God. Right? Celebrated. So that's the main gist of this is if we will celebrate that goodbye because we're doing something for the Lord, then it's gonna be great. The reward is heaven. So if we're drugged down, literally, not even figuratively. If you are being drugged down by tying yourself to somebody of the world and not being willing to tie on to God and say, I am going to go on and I'm going to leave this situation, and I have got to remove you from my life, even if it is an altogether situation, because it's what's best for God in my walk with God. If you don't do that, it's going to drag you to the pits of hell. Right? But if you rejoice in the fact that you have done right in the eyes of the Lord and you have kept his commandments, then you're going to be happy. It is going to be a glorious occasion. It's going to be this party. Like I said, all Elijah did was he cast his mantle, and it meant I have chosen you to walk with me. The Lord has given me to choose you to be my successor. And he said, okay. And he went on. And he went with Elijah. And then we know the rest of the story, that they went and they ministered and they prophesied and they did this. And then whenever Elijah was taken up into the chariot of fire, Elisha picked up his mantle and said, I want to do what he did and then some, and double it. He took up his mantle again. And so he never once looked back on the I'm leaving my family. Hold on, he said, let me go kiss them and tell them bye, and I'm on my way. And that's what he did. He didn't dwell. When he got there in the midst of this, he didn't sit there with his family around the table or around whatever they were eating around at the time, the hearth or whatever you want, And he didn't just sit there and they start reminiscing about the glory days of the family. And then he said, you know what? I can't leave this. I've got to stay here. I can't move on because of what I have here. And so if he would have done that, we wouldn't have half the story. We wouldn't have some of these stories of Elisha. Some of my favorite stories are of Elisha. I like talking about Elijah and Elisha. I like reading about Elijah and Elisha. So if we wouldn't have had this, if he would have done what we might have done, then we would have had that situation. He would have been in a different situation. he would that would have been a rebellion against God. And in the Old Testament, that's they took that super. We should take it as seriously as they did then, because it's not supposed to rebel against God. And so we get to that point in our lives where we fight that calling. We fight the ability to go do these things. And if we if we try to sometimes coax, if somebody comes to us and they say, I feel that I'm supposed to go somewhere else. Sometimes I think we inadvertently, and though we don't mean to, we will try to persuade them to not go. We might use phrases such as, be sure it's the Lord's will. I know we mean to make sure it's the Lord's will, but sometimes I think we mean, I want you to stay here. And so I want you to make sure it's the Lord's will that you do. That's something that I think goes against my will. It'd be hard for me to leave a lecture. My kids have started school here. My house is paid for. I love it here. I have a job that's close to here. I mean, yeah, I could live closer to my job, but at the same time, what's 30 minutes to drive one way? It's an hour a day driving. Anyway, but if the Lord called me to go somewhere else, I would have to go. Because every time He has called me and I have done what He has called me to do, the reward has been great. Whenever He called me and I ran, there was no reward. It was trial. It was tribulation. It was heartache. It was nothing but worry and pain that I went through that chapter, that season. But then I quit running, and I answered it. I went. I said, "No, I'm not. I'm done." And so, if He was to say to me, and I felt that I was to leave, I would have to slap a for sale by owner sign in front of my house and start looking to where I'm supposed to go. So, and then it would be up to my siblings, my aunt, my cousins, everyone that lives here to support me in that avenue. But it would also be up to us as a church family to support me or somebody else in that avenue. And like I said, I know I'm using me as an example here, but it's just because it's easier to say me because I'm talking about stuff that I've dealt with in the past. But instead, we got to rejoice. When Brother Adams resigned, Brother Swearingen resigned, and they left the church, we were all sad. We knew what had happened, what was wrong, the health, or that they were on their, that they were, the Lord had told them their time was done, or what have you. We knew that this was done. We had a meal, an appreciation meal, if you will, that they were, for what they've done in the few years they were here. But at the same time, I know it was hard to not want to say, are you sure you don't want to stay, or that you need to stay? Are you sure you're hearing correctly? Or, maybe your hearing's a little bad. You're not hearing the Lord correctly. Turn your spiritual bell tones up so you can hear better and stay. But at the same time, we had to be supportive of Him. We had to say, we had to trust that they were actually praying, that the Lord had told them this in their prayer. Because sometimes I think that's what we doubt is, we doubt somebody has actually prayed enough to be hearing from the Lord. Because I think sometimes we think we pray enough to hear from the Lord, and if we ain't heard it, then they ain't heard it. But the Lord the Lord don't tell me everything about Sister Rhonda. The Lord don't tell me everything about Sister Emily. But the Lord will tell me what Brother Anthony needs to hear. The Lord's going to tell me what Brother Anthony needs to do. Because I'm an example to Sister Emily, but I'm not her parent. I'm not her aunt. I'm not her uncle. I'm not. I've been here since she was yay high. And, we've been best friends for years. But at the same time, I'm not that person for her. But I am Ducky and Amelia's uncle or great uncle, if you will. So they I'm to be that example for them. But even more so for Caleb and Jocelyn, those are the ones I need to be the biggest example for because they are the ones that see me the most. You know, it's a the other night whenever Caleb was leaving, we were sitting there and Alan was visiting with me and Sam, and Caleb was standing there on his back with his backpack, his water bottle, his game system, standing there with it in his hand, right by the couch, and just looking around. I told him, I said, "Papa, just sit down. You can sit in here, you can sit in your bedroom, just wait. You know, we're visiting." Alan said, "Yeah, I don't want to leave just yet." So Caleb went in his room for a few more minutes. Well, came back out in the living room, and he didn't even take his backpack off. He sat back on it, and he was sitting there. And so we said something about. So one of us said something. Me or Alan said something about home, and Caleb looked at Alan and said, "Hey, speaking of home," Alan said, "Well, you are home." He's like, "No, what about your home?" So Caleb wanted to leave. So he had already told me and his mom bye as soon as Alan walked in the house, and he knew Alan was there. But we sat there for an hour talking. Alan's like, "Tell your mom and dad bye." He's like, "I already did. We were here for another hour. You got to tell them bye again." And so Caleb's like, "Bye, Dad. Bye, Mom." He didn't understand of why we're saying these, tell them bye again. Because as a kid getting to go to your aunt and uncle's house, you don't care that you're leaving your mom and daddy at the house. You may not do anything different at their house than you did at your house, but the difference is it ain't your house. Your mama and daddy ain't there to maybe say, "Hey, done enough of that today. Let's do this," or pick up, do this and that. And so he, but as a mom and a dad, when your kids are leaving, you want them to say goodbye to you because you're going to miss them a little bit. It's a Caleb sticks to himself in his bedroom a bunch. I'll pop my head in there every once in a while, just kind of pick on him or go in there and tell him I ain't loved on you, and I'd lay on there and hug him and kiss on him. But it's because I love my boy. JoJo, on the other hand, we don't have to worry about it. She comes in the room with us all the time. So we get love from Joe all the time. But at the same time, when she leaves, I still miss him. I have to tell him at night, "Good night, I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow." Because I don't see him until the evening time. And they always say, "Good night, Daddy, I love you," or sometimes they just say, "I'll see you tomorrow," or something like that. But it's a thing because they are going to another room and they're going to go to sleep, and I'm going to go to my room. It's going to be a long period of time before I see them. But like whenever my young nieces are at my house, I don't see them as often as I should. So it's whenever they leave and I see them, I'm like, "Hey, what are you supposed to do when you see Uncle?" Run up there and they give me a big hug. And so and that's what I do with all my little nieces and nephews. It's always been, I want a hug from you before and after, before you leave my house and when you get to my house. I want a hug because I love you. Because God loves me. He loves you. He loves every one of us. We should be excited to see people, but like I said, whenever somebody is leaving because the Lord has called them to leave, or you're having to leave somebody you're having to remove somebody from your life because the Lord has said that, it shouldn't be. It's going to be a somber feeling, but at the same time, you should feel glory, mercy, and grace because you're doing what the Lord has told you to do. When the Lord tells us to do something and we do it, it feels amazing. It may not feel amazing right off the bat. It's going to feel amazing. When you don't do what the Lord tells you, it's bad. You're not going to feel that amazing feeling. You're not going to feel good. You're not going to feel happy. You're not going to feel enthusiastic. You're going to feel mad, sad. I can always tell when I ain't been listening to God because I always start getting upset about things. I start getting worried. I'm not worried, but I start getting a little. My anxiety gets the best of me, and I feel that little feeling that comes up right between that, not in my stomach, not in my chest, but right there in your diaphragm. Right there, I can always tell when that feeling starts to come up right there, and I start knowing, better go pray, because you're not right with God, boy. Because I know that's where it starts. And then out of my mouth comes out regurgitations of meaning. Not profanity, but I will say things that hurt people's feelings. The problem is when I say it, I don't care. So if I'm not right with God, I'm not being my example. So I know I need to go pray. I need to be right. I need to make sure that I can say, if it comes down to it, I can say goodbye. Like I said, it's a hard, hard word. One of the hardest words in the dictionary. Because I can't speak for no one else here, but I've said the word goodbye more with that frog in your throat where you fighting back the tears and you don't want to cry in front of people, especially as a big burly guy. You don't want to cry in front of somebody. I'm a tough guy. I don't cry when I'm leaving someone's home or somebody's leaving my home. But I got I got a catch in my throat. I've been dealing with a cold and been fighting these allergies. It's never gonna be that I was sad that you said goodbye, but it's I don't like to until we see each other again, or no matter how you look at it. If somebody comes up to me and they say, brother, brother Mark and sister need to come up, and they tell us, we've been called to go to Byers and start a church in Byers. Brother Mark's going to start, preaching over there and start a little daughter home mission there. We're going to miss Sister Emily and Sister Benita and Brother Andrew and Brother Mark, but they're not going away. We can still go see them at church and support them. And like I said, these are all hypotheticals that I'm giving. But whenever we say goodbye, we got to do it with joy in our hearts. We got to do it with a right and just spirit, because the Lord did that. He does that with everything he does. He never leaves us. He never tells us goodbye. Think about it. He never says goodbye to us because he never leaves us. So we got to take him with us instead of trying to say goodbye to him. We got to say, come on, we're doing this for the Lord. I thank you for listening and being attentive this morning. I hope that this was not scattered and it was something that could be useful. Thank you for allowing me to, the opportunity to be up here. I don't tonight forget prayer 5:30, church 6. Come knowing that God is here and knowing that God will do something. I don't want to say come expecting, come knowing. When you know it, it'll happen. So come knowing this evening and ready to go. And we will see you this evening.